Hi everyone, I'm Alicia Dempster and I'm here to talk to you tonight about Dr. Thomas Kidd's book, George Whitefield, American Spiritual Founding Father. Dr. Thomas Kidd is a distinguished American historian from Baylor University who has written numerous scholarly works on American history, the Founding Fathers, and Baptists in America. He has been interviewed by religious organizations, magazines, newspapers, and even such major publications as the Wall Street Journal. In his book, Dr. Kidd writes of a young Anglican evangelist, a man who traveled through the North and South extensively, nonstop in the mid-18th century, preaching the Word of God and the new birth message to millions. In Chapter 5, Thomas Kidd discusses the itinerant preacher who had a soft spot in his heart for orphans, the unconverted, and others, even those of other faiths, and those who preach the Word. In fact, just about everybody. Dr. Kidd provides us, the reader, with information on Whitefield's journeys in the South and his own personal dream of Bethesda Orphanage. In 1810, Isaiah Thomas, an early historian of American printing, wrote, "The celebrated itinerant preacher, when he visited America, was like a comet. He drew attention of all classes of people." It might even be added here that he did that for all denominations as well. None, it seems, were immune to the charismatic young preacher who at this time was only about 24 years old. That includes Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin wrote in his autobiography that he had first objected to the Georgia Bethesda Orphanage project, feeling that orphans should be brought to Philadelphia or some other urban center rather than transporting workmen, materials, schoolmasters, and the orphans. Franklin then went on to describe how Whitefield softened his resolve so that the humanitarian skeptic decided first to give the copper coins that he was carrying. Then he gave the silver, and by the end of Whitefield's sermon, Benjamin Franklin had given the gold and everything he had with him. Benjamin Franklin and George Whitefield would go on to be not only collaborators in the publishing of George Whitefield's sermons and journals, but they became friends, lifelong friends. Try as he might, Whitefield could never convert Franklin, but there was a mutual respect between the two men, and Franklin respected this young man and believed him to be sincere. Dr. Kidd gives us further insight into his journeys from town to town, his communications through letters, published journals, and he affords the reader a view of a pious, devoted man who worked himself ragged in an attempt to reach as many souls as he possibly could in his lifetime. Kidd interjects small details from Whitefield's journals, where he notes how beautiful a town was, or how he loved a path or the trees, and how people were so welcoming in certain towns. Though he was known to be brash, blunt, and forthright, sometimes prideful, he had a soft heart and was willing to go the extra mile for anyone. His dream of Bethesda was to provide a home to orphan children, whether they were white, Indian, or Negro, to give them godly upbringing and teach them to work and make something of their lives. He wanted to teach them that God never forsakes his own and that they belonged. It might be pertinent here to point out that Dr. Kidd briefly mentions Whitefield and his thoughts on slavery and the Bible, and he does so only as introductory lead into the next chapter, which deals directly with those issues, Whitefield's position, thoughts, and visions on slavery. Dr. Kidd writes of the friends that Whitefield had and his detractors. In some cities, he was welcomed with open arms. In others, the clergy who did not agree with this very young upstart, they were offended by him and his preaching and of the increasingly Calvinistic message that he delivered, and they took it upon themselves to disinvite him. They even published in the papers derogatory information and opinions of him in advance of his arrival. And even there were those who banned him from their churches. Whitefield truly knew no bounds when it came to preaching the Word of God, stating his beliefs, or when it came to calling out those he believed were sinners, whether that was in thought or actions. Further, Whitefield went on with his friends who were the Wesley brothers. We know them as the founders of the Methodist Church. They had been friends for a long time, and during the year 1741, Whitefield returned to England after a venture to America.